Good morning, folks. I'd like to welcome everybody in person and everybody attending online to this commission meeting. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's take a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll begin with a roll call. Start this week with Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Doug Smith, sorry. Commissioner Stephen.
Here.
I'm present. Commissioner Mike Smith.
Here.
And Vicki is not attending online or anything, is she? Okay. Commissioner Cause is absent. Beginning with public comment this morning, I was told we do have at least one person, Kristen Workman, to speak during public comment. Please come to the podium and state your name and address.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name's Kirsten Workman. I live at 331 Lansing, or Sage Street in Lansing. I'm here today to encourage you to reduce the mill levy so as not to raise our property taxes. Inflation is making Leavenworth County residents poorer. Rising property taxes encourage people to move to Missouri or make home ownership less and less of a reality for many of us. As property value assessments continue to go up and up, saying that the county intends to keep the mill levy flat makes it sound like the county does not intend to raise our taxes, but you and the Leavenworth Times know that what that actually means is an increase in our tax bill, a big one in this year's case. I'm sorry, I was running to get here, and now I'm nervous, so
That's
I'm going to take a
right.
breath.
You're fine.
So, when planning my own budget for next year for my household, if I find that I will need additional funds to cover all I've planned, I don't submit a bill to my employer for the difference. I make cuts. I'm sure that you do the same. Please tell whoever has been tasked with building the budget to prioritize a little better. Taxpayers are not the county's workhorses. Please just say no. If you expect to need additional money for next year's budget to account for inflation, then please calculate that need based on the rate of inflation, not our property values. We can see from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that the current rate of inflation for Midwest, based on the Consumer Price Index, is 3.7% over the last year. You could reduce the mill levy by a significant amount, exceed revenue neutral by just a smidge, and still collect more taxes than you need to prudently manage the county. How is that not a win-win for all of us and something that could potentially bump each of you all into the category of County Commissioner Rockstar? It's just a thought. Please help build back public trust by avoiding misleading phrases like keeping the mill levy flat. Keep people from being taxed out of their homes. Keep rent prices from skyrocketing. Keep our population from dwindling so we can all continue to invest in our community and our families. Thank you very much.
I have a question for her.
Yes.
What rate what is your understanding of the rate that we're going to increase proposed property taxes?
I did a little bit of research and I did not get a clear understanding of what your intentions were. So I thought, well, if we're planning or if we're meeting to talk about keeping the mill levy flat or just plain, increasing it a little bit, I thought I should come here and ask.
Well, on social media, it's been put out that we're planning to raise.
I don't use social media.
Well, a local representative has put out that we're going to plan to raise property taxes by 14.8%.
Okay, I can't
speak
for that.
That is the problem with that number is that's the rate of the increase in valuations across the county, and I think it's been adjusted downwards a little bit. Mm-hmm. But that does not indicate where the rate of an increase of taxes would be. So there's a misunderstanding of when you put it out on social media that we're planning to raise taxes 14.8%. Mm-hmm. That is inaccurate.
Okay, I didn't say that. I didn't mean to imply that either. I'm just saying when I see a headline in the paper that says we're working to keep the mill levy flat, that sends radars up in on my end and think, okay, well.
Well, we're responding to a lot of emails and people being given that information, and then we're having to tell them, well, I'm really sorry, but that information was inaccurate.
Okay,
and that's really problematic, because I can tell you, I think this, I mean, I don't speak for everybody, I speak for myself, but we are trying to be fiscally conservative on the budget, but we're also trying to make sure the infrastructure of the county is maintained, and there's a real balance there.
Certainly.
1 second for me. Okay, if I could say one thing, you gave the number, was that 3.4, 3.8?
3.7.
Okay.
For the CPI.
We, and this may not happen, we instructed the county administrator to keep it under 4. So we're trying
That's
to
awesome.
we're trying to get there, and I think what Commissioner Stephen is saying is sometimes numbers get out there, and you're right, a mill levy doesn't stay flat. But then again, you want your house to go up, but you just don't want it to go up like it's going. And we are working so hard with state legislators to pass a new law that the voters will probably be voting on next year to keep it so it can only go up a certain amount. Because you're absolutely right. We totally agree that. But we're trying to keep that under 4 if possible and still provide the services. I just wanted to throw that out to you so you knew what we're looking at.
Okay, so I understand that you want to increase the mill levy, but by 4% or less?
No, we're not going to increase the mill levy.
I mean, I'm sorry.
The budget
yes.
itself is being, and we're nowhere near finalizing it, and the commissioners can make the decision themselves, but I know the instruction we gave the county administrator, Mark, who's doing a good job, is we didn't really want to see anything over 4, but again, I'm saying this we're only a quarter through the budget to what we're trying to say, because we hear you, believe me, and we pay them too. So I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind when we're going through this and let you know we appreciate you coming in.
That's why I'm here. So
Okay.
thanks for engaging with me too. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good job.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public comment? That's all I had listed. If not, we'll move on to administrative business. Mr. Lawfrey, do you have anything?
I do not have anything today.
Any of the commissioners have anything for administrative business?
I don't.
I got one thing. The Planning Commission is meeting on the 12th, I believe, to discuss what we discussed in our work session. Is there any way we could have a work session prior to their meeting to kind of let them know where the commission, how they feel and where we stand and what we expect?
You mean
On anything about Planning Commission stuff.
I think we had a
We
work
had
session
one
here
at
a
the
few
time.
months ago, but we can certainly schedule another one.
I mean, when the Planning Commission, like, we could have just a little work session right before the Planning Commission has their meeting.
On their
that
time,
night.
yeah, on their time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I mean, come back that night.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, they meet at 6:30. What time?
5:30.
They meet at 5:30?
Yes.
So 4:30.
I have no problem doing that.
They might not be able to be here by 5:30.
Well, or
or 4:30.
we'll just, it wouldn't take long, I wouldn't think.
Yeah.
I thought we had scheduled quarterly meetings with them.
We had discussed quarterly meetings. When we schedule these, it is good to have some kind of an agenda. Is there something specific we want to talk about, or?
Just, well, I guess what we expect the role of the Planning Commission and maybe some of the regs we're going to be discussing, or they'll be discussing.
And the last regs we went over probably,
Yeah.
the road.
I think there's a difference here. Are you talking about building codes?
Not really.
Okay. Because I know that the building committee, the folks, they're meeting to discuss the building codes and versions of building codes. That'd be different than the planning commission.
And when is that meeting?
I don't know off the top of my head,
Okay.
but I know
Well,
that
I'd actually like to meet with both. I don't have a problem coming to meetings.
Yeah, we could set up quarter meetings with both of them for a while. So we
With
get-
the
make sure we're
codes
all on the
committee,
same
I would like to see them, like, what it is that they're proposing, and then when they get their act together, kind of to know what they're wanting to visit about, maybe then we could have a meeting together.
Okay.
Yeah, I think communication is important.
Yep. Like I said, I know these folks work and they meet at night, and I said I had no problem coming back and meeting with them right before.
Yeah, I do think it's important. I think communication is that's a good point there. I think it's important that each commissioner, you each have representation on the planning commission at each point specifically, and I do think it's important that you communicate with them on a regular basis and let them know where you're at, and that way they know the people who are appointing them what they're looking for, and if you have different that's important. Each of you meet with your.
And I do that on a regular basis. You're absolutely right, Mark.
Yeah, County Road 30, water line.
Next week.
Okay.
No, it's good. It's all good.
Okay, I
Yeah, so Mike.
had a couple things. First of all, I'm continuing to get concerns about the flatlands. Folks in the area are continuing to express concern, and I just thought I should let everybody know that we're continuing to get issues and concerns from that area, and I'm sure Jeff is too. So,
Didn't we get a something from KDHE?
We got a report.
yeah, the methane. I think that was the methane gas testing. One point on that issue that should be made is that if you have a C&D landfill, there would never ever be methane gas. That is the fact that the KDHE decided to do testing for methane gas. To me, that's dispositive of the fact that they know that things were put in the landfill that were not supposed to be put in the landfill. Because in a C&D landfill, you would never have methane gas. Commissioner Culberson and I toured the Hams landfill, and they actually are so sophisticated that when they do reclamation, they have methane gas wells, and they actually profit off of make profit off of that. And it's a really well-run facility, and it was really, but the fact that KDHE was doing testing for methane, come on, folks.
Chairman, is it okay that County Councilor, could you give us an update on that? Could you give us an
I
update?
can't hear you.
Give us an update on that, what Mike's referring to right now.
Well, Commissioners, first of all, this is not an agenda item. So I caution against an in-depth attempt at discussion because no one's prepared for it. We did receive a report from Kansas Department of Health and Environment, and it tested the thresholds for 2 certain types of gases. I'm not a chemist. I cannot name them specifically for you. But in both instances, they tested above ground and at the ground level, and in each case, the level was before their threshold. That's the extent to which I can report to you this morning.
Thank you.
So that's the flatlands issue. On the other thing I wanted to just briefly talk about is I wanted to revisit and talk about George Road. There's been some things, unfortunately, that the narrative on George Road has not been, and on the roads around the KDOT project. I just wanted to give a little brief narrative on this. First, there was the announcement of the project by KDOT, and there have been a lot of fatalities out there by Helen's Hilltop, and this is a wonderful thing that they're doing this hill leveling and the work they're doing. So it's a great thing. So we received that announcement, and then there was discussion of the project with Mr. Ryan Barrett from KDOT. Then KDOT announced they were going to have a meeting to discuss with local neighbors and county officials and people from the fire department, local fire departments, the project. And KDOT sponsored the meeting at Helen's Hilltop, and they proposed their detour routes, and discussion was about increased traffic on local roadways, and George Road specifically came up during that conversation, and KDOT officials, including Kelly Coltala, Ryan Barrett, the other folks that were there, had agreed that George Road was an inappropriate reroute, that it wasn't appropriate. And so fast forward, County Commission meeting was had, and it's in the minutes, expressed the consensus of the board, and it was voted on that George Road would be closed to through traffic, and KDOT actually agreed that they would pay for the signage of the road. And the attempt of that was to limit it to local traffic only, keep commercial vehicles off of the roadway. At the meeting at Helen's Hilltop, it was discussed that maybe the signs would be even staggered so that only cars could drive through the signage out on the road. And that was discussed by KDOT officials on the road, and that the road would be closed to through traffic and they would maintain the signage. They agreed. KDOT also expressed concerns that the road should not be the main thoroughfare or reroute detour. And even with the closure to the through traffic KDOT also indicated their concerns. Even an increase in local traffic would require some treatment, so they agreed that they were going to be willing to treat the road and actually reimburse. I think initially they were going to pay for it, and then it turned out that they're going to reimburse the county. There was a letter issued, signed by 5 commissioners, all 5 commissioners, and the letter, Board of Commissioners requesting your consideration and response, and that letter was issued October 19th. And what we requested that the specific request was that they would do. Let me see if I can read the exact. Including asphalting or chemical dust treatment. So the request was made if KDOT would be willing to asphalt the road. So we did specifically ahead of time, ahead of the project, request funding for the asphalting of the road. If they wouldn't asphalt the road, then to dust treat the road. And in the letter, it was mentioned that we about 3,500 vehicles per day were at that location. So fast forward, the project was delayed from the initial start date in early May, and then was to the end of May, and concerns were raised with Ryan Barrett at KDOT about the reroute signage within Tonganoxie and out by McLeod, that there wasn't a, normally they give you a 7-day warning or 9-day warning, and that signage wasn't being done. Indication by KDOT that they indicated they would place additional signage on 2440 in Tonganoxie and near McLeod, posting their reroutes. Prior to the project commencing, 250th Street was discussed about whether that road should possibly be closed to through traffic, and the decision or comments by staff and decision was wait and see after the project began what the level of traffic would be and whether we would need to quickly respond at that time. So the project started, immediately traffic problems of George Road. The issues seem to be concerned about speed, volume, lack of enforcement, and cars and commercial traffic, cars passing, and lack of signage. Some of that was corrected, some of it is continuing problem. Traffic count was taken. Initially the road had 110 cars daily, and the traffic count that we did take indicated that at 2 locations it was over 1,900 cars. So if you go with that letter, the 3,500 number vehicles per day, and you say 1,900, 60% of the road reroute traffic from the highway was rerouting onto George Road, if we take that number. So initially we made a motion to close George Road temporarily to traffic for traffic safety issues and speed signage could be examined and looked at. That motion was voted down. Then at the next county commission meeting, we had a motion to authorize temporary speed reductions on certain roadways, and it was not a policy, but it was just certain roadways, and it was near the project. And the criticism at that time was that it had not been on the agenda, though we had discussed it for 45 minutes in the previous meeting. And the other criticism was that it was only local and not presented in terms of a long-term policy. So the request then was made that staff responded that they would develop a long-term policy and place it on the agenda. So staff spent quite a bit of staff time developing this policy and brought it back to the county commission meeting last week. And the policy was presented to allow public works, when necessary, to reduce speeds on the roads. And the policy was discussed and then voted down. Following that, the request was made that at least current 35 mile per hour speed limits on signed roads or where allowed would be placed at intersections. And it was stated that where there was signage, it was agreed by consensus to reduce the speeds to the currently posted speed limits. However, after staff has reviewed it turns out that very few of those roads are posted currently. So current speeds will be 55 mile an hour on the connecting roads. And that's my understanding, and you can correct me, Mark, if that's not correct. If they're not posted, it's not in accordance with our resolution. Is that correct?
Per state statute, unposted gravel roads in the state of Kansas are 55 mile an hour speed limits.
So back to the discussion of options. Under current policy, which is the resolution that's currently in effect, under current policy, there would have to be a traffic study requiring a lengthy process, and I don't know if there's any way that we can abbreviate that process. That should be discussed. But we have no ability to reduce speeds, which unfortunately are not 35 mile an hour, which we originally thought, but are in fact 55 mile an hour. So my thought originally on all of this was that the county would quickly be able to react as conditions changed and as we had the amount of traffic changing, and that we could adjust to the concerns and needs of local folks. Had a lot of people calling me about farming. They're driving farm implements and farm equipment. They have a lot more road traffic on their roads where they normally don't have much traffic. And the concern was what they're asking is just post it at 35. So I thought, that was when we couldn't get the 25, I thought, well, can we just get it down to 35? So the only thing I see as options is immediately initiate traffic studies on the connecting roadways and see how long that takes. But it's not going to solve the problem immediately right now. Or implement the policy that we had on before us last week, and if you feel it's necessary, we could have a work session later to update it and hone it and fine tune it, but allow us to get the 35 mile an hour speed limit signs at least posted on those roads. So I just want to present this because I'm getting a lot of folks are concerned out there, and the speed actually is 55, not 35.
And it has been forever.
Well, but it doesn't.
We voted on this. Don't you respect the vote of this board? We voted on this. We vetted this, and we voted.
No, I don't.
We're done.
We have a different.
You're trying to do this like a school bond. We're going to run it till you get your way.
No, the conditions have changed.
No, they haven't. I'll tell you what's going to change. There's never going to be any more KDOT funding in this county because of this.
No, conditions have changed because we didn't know that those roads were not signed.
Do we know what the traffic?
I knew it.
Do we know what the
That's
traffic
why we
count
asked
is
staff
today?
to check it out. What's that?
Do we know what the traffic count is today?
We only have the most recent traffic count. I don't know if he's planning to do one in the next couple of weeks. I'm still talking to folks on the road. It's still elevated traffic on George Road itself, but really we're talking about the additional connecting roads being excessively having excessive speed on them. And the policy last week would have allowed Public Works just to, on a temporary basis, make the change.
Well, I know what we're trying to figure out is that the problem is not really the speed of the vehicles, it's the number of vehicles that we're trying to figure out how to cut down on the number of vehicles. And
the
that's
folks
the
that are calling me
part.
are also concerned with that when they're out there on their tractor, folks are not being responsible and the speeds are excessive.
What's law enforcement say?
They'll enforce whatever we sign.
Well, I understand, but
So if we could, at least on a temporary basis, adopt the policy that we had before us last
it's
week.
against the MUTCD manual.
It
is
what we're
against the
running into.
MUTCD manual.
We have
I don't
a legal,
care how you shake it up.
And that's what we're running into. I think
we have a legal opinion from our county councilor that states we are allowed to post it. So it's not against state statute. State statute is, this is not a permanent thing. This is a temporary basis for a temporary reduction in speed, and it allows Public Works to make the decision. They don't have to sign all the roads, but they can sign where they feel it's necessary. Right now, the county government has no ability to make any kind of response at all here.
Well, that's the problem. It's trying to pass a permanent resolution for a temporary problem.
But we need to have a provision to allow.
Yeah, and I think we need to get another traffic count to see what the current traffic count is.
But the only way to do it legally is a full-blown traffic study to set a speed limit.
So
By law.
By law.
well, and That is not what the county councilor said in her legal opinion to us, and you all have copies of it. She said on a temporary basis for public safety, we could lower those speeds. And that's all I'm asking, temporarily. Let's implement the policy, temporary. You can have a work session on what the permanent policy should be, but let's adopt that policy that the staff worked diligently on and put into place some safety measures to get it down from 55 mile an hour.
We have no data that says there's any crash data. There's no influx of tickets being written.
We don't
for
have
too
to have
fast
data
Well, how do you
for
think that
lowering the
intersection's
speed.
getting fixed? If it wasn't for the fatalities and the crash data, that intersection would not be getting fixed.
Sir, I agree with you on that, but what I am disagreeing with you on is that a temporary measure can be taken, and the government here looks like it's ineffectual and unable to act. Let's give Public Works the ability on certain roadways to take action.
I'll never support going against the MUTCD manual.
Commissioners, one thing I would say is it's not on the agenda today. It was on the agenda last week. It was voted on. So as far as staff not being able to respond, I do think we responded. We provided what was asked for last week. And it was voted on. So,
No, I'm not meaning you can't respond to the policy request. I'm meaning that you have no ability to go out and lower those speeds
That's correct.
under the current. So if we keep this resolution in effect, we have no ability to act in any circumstance. So I would like to make a motion that we adopt the policy that staff prepared for temporarily lowering those speeds that we have now found out are actually are 55 rather than 35. What this actually is kind of a contradictory policy, because it says the intent of these folks was to lower the speeds to 35, and then it follows it up with a contradiction.
Do you want to put that on the agenda for next week? It's not on the agenda for this week.
Well, because of public safety issues, I would like to move that we adopt the policy, because it had been on the agenda last week. You know, there should be provision for old business. We don't do old business.
You know, Commissioner Stephen, I think we voted on this last week. It was 3-2, and I supported you on this, and I still support you. But I don't like the way this is playing out right now. If we're going to talk about this, I think we need to give better guidance to the county administrator and the staff. I understand your concerns. I backed you, as you recall. But I don't know if I'm comfortable with the way this is being approached right now. I respect the members of the county commissioners with the way you voted 3-2. I think there is an issue on that road down there, but the vote was taken, and unless we're going to do something totally different, we're just going to beat this horse to death.
And with an even number today, I don't think you're going to get the results you're after anyway.
Well, I'm letting the folks down there in that area know that I am fighting to get those speed limits reduced, and I'm going to do everything I can to get the speed limits reduced. And I do not know why, when we have a legal opinion from our county councilor, that we're not willing to give staff the ability at certain locations on a temporary basis to lower those speeds. I do not know why this is becoming, to me, the mistake seems to have been made ahead of the project, that we didn't, I had no idea that this body would not be willing to react when we had discussed.
Would you like to put this on an agenda item next week and then get a traffic count before that next meeting?
Would you suggest that I do that?
That's what I'm suggesting.
Okay, I'll do it.
Well, is there a consensus to put it on the agenda? Because I think we've done beat this thing to death.
I think that you heard the chairman. So
How long does it take to get a traffic count, Mr. Lothar?
3
Well,
days.
most of our traffic counters are already out on other locations. So they'd have to probably, and I'm just saying probably, I don't know that, they'd probably have to go pull them off of some other road. And usually we put them out and try to catch 2-3 days for sure. Typically it'd be like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I don't know that you would have a traffic count before next week. And some of these roads, I mean, there's multiple roads we're discussing here that were originally in the proposal as far as roads impacted. So I don't think you would have traffic counts on all those roads by next week. Today's Wednesday. So
Right.
The problem is here that I see is we used the process argument 2 weeks ago, and the process argument was that it's not on the agenda. And I had presented a motion that would have been totally localized. And then everybody said, well, let's put this on the agenda. So we did. We put it on the agenda, and we had staff spend staff time to work on a actual policy. The policy doesn't say they have to post signs. It says that they're allowed to post signs. And they would do that with using their judgment of where we're having issues. So right now,
And you would question their judgment, and you'd be harassing them about putting signs up. You're talking about the staff time?
You know what?
You caused staff to use all this
sir,
time.
that is not accurate.
Well, and like I said, I think the problem is not really the speed.
You saying
it's the
those kind of
number
things doesn't
vehicles.
advance the ball.
So,
Number one thing,
Another
Mike,
count.
Chairman, that could, do we want to put it on next week or in the following weeks, or do we want to let it go for a while? I think the chair's made a point here, and it's up to us to do it. This going back and forth right now is not soft, because we got
I would like to have it on the agenda if that's what.
well, and I think we need to get a traffic count was an important piece to that agenda item. So if we can't get a traffic count by next Wednesday, let's put it on the agenda for the next Wednesday and get a traffic count by then. I think is the way to go.
And in closing, if anybody from KDOT is watching our meeting, feel free to spend any money you want in my district, and I'll make sure we don't have to go through this.
This doesn't have anything to do with that, Mr. Smith.
Where do you think the funding's coming from?
Let's do it that way. Let's put
Yeah.
it on to-
So we have do we have a consensus that we're going to do? So do we need to make a motion?
That work?
Do we need is it all right to just do consensus, or do you need motion?
Just consensus to get it on the agenda item for not next week, but the following week, and a consensus to get a traffic count before then. Everybody agree to that?
Yep.
You agree to that, Commissioner?
Yeah, we're fine.
I don't.
No? You agree to that?
Yep.
That's what we'll do. You have anything else?
That's it.
Commissioner Stephen? Consent agenda, is there anything that needs to be removed from the consent agenda for conflict of interest? If not, I make a motion that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I do have one question.
Yes, sir.
On the bills, there was 2 bills from Scottwood Industries. One was $6,500, $6,800. Is that the dust control for George Road that we'll be reimbursed for?
I don't know that, but I would assume because we don't do
Well,
a lot of other.
Well, it's mag chloride. We wouldn't be using it for ice control.
Scotwood, that's what they do.
Right. So that was the deal. They're going to reimburse us.
I assume that's what that is. 'Cause
I hope
we
they
don't
will.
do- We don't do a lot of.
Yeah.
They may not.
Scotwood, so, but I don't have that.
Okay, that's all I had.
Okay, and as far as I know, that's why we couldn't shut the road, because they wouldn't reimburse us if we closed the road.
Yeah.
So leaving the road open.
I don't think that we were ever officially told that by KDOT. I think that's
Yeah.
what
Well, that's
people
what
were
they're-
surmising because there's a little clause that was put in the agreement. But at Helen's Hilltop, KDOT agreed that they didn't want to have that route as the primary detour.
Right.
But then they made it the unofficial detour once we asked for dust control.
So I have a motion.
That's not what the intent was.
But that's what the document that came back from
Well,
KDOT. We're getting on the weeds again.
And we don't know what the definition of unofficial detour is.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. We'll begin voting with Commissioner Doug Smith.
Aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Consent agenda is adopted. Formal board actions, we don't have any items on that agenda, so we're on to presentations and discussion items. Discussion of the 2024 budget. Who would like to begin that?
Commissioners, I told you each week I'd have this as an agenda item in case you all wanted to add or.
I'll hand this out while we're in the meeting. I apologize, it's not in order because the copy machine didn't do both sides. It's just good.
Davy Crockett.
Good
I like
read.
Davy Crockett.
Okay.
Did you want to read anything on that, Commissioner Smith, or just for our
Just talk
information?
about it.
Okay.
You guys haven't had a chance to read it or anything.
Okay.
But I
It's
will.
got to pertain with our budget,
But
and
I
what
will.
we are obligated to fund and what we don't have to fund.
Mark, if I could, is there anything that you want to bring up? I know you've been working on reducing the budget by the percentage we had asked for. Is there anything that stands out to you right now that you want to discuss with us?
Well, Commissioners, I would like to, I guess, a couple items that I would like to discuss or at least maybe address that have come up. One, the board gave me direction to work with the departments to try to get to a flat mill levy. And as the point was made earlier, a flat mill levy does not mean the taxes stay the same for everybody. Some folks, if your property valuation goes up and the mill levy stays flat, your taxes go up. That is absolutely a truth. But not everybody's property valuations goes up. So I think we've had that conversation in this room.
Right.
The other thing that I would like to point out that I think is probably most pertinent, all of our end revenue is not ad valorem taxes. It's somewhere around half of our revenue. So when other revenue streams go away or dry up, it falls to ad valorem taxes to cover that shortage. And as you heard when the Register of Deeds came in, revenue is down by over $500,000 this year and will likely be again next year, if not more. So you add those 2 years together, that's $1 million. That's a mill levy. That's one mill,
right?
Basically. So when revenue goes down elsewhere, the only way we have to balance that is via ad valorem taxes. So while you may see an increase of valuation on your home, I know I did, and most people did, and I think it's 13.4% or something around there is where it ended up at. If the mill levy stays the same, that is an increase on those houses on average of 13.4%. But that doesn't mean we're increasing everything 13.4%. That's not the case. We are not. We have to make up for the shortfall in those other revenue streams. Unlike some of our the cities, we do not use sales tax for operational expenditures. The cities, I believe every city in Leavenworth County uses some sales tax except for maybe Linwood and Easton for operational expenditures. Our sales tax goes straight to road projects. That's what it's specifically passed for. That's what we're limited to spending on. So our sales tax revenues are up over what we would have seen 5 years ago. Projected growth is up more than what we anticipated as well. But that money is tied specifically to road projects. So again, back to will the ad valorem taxes go up? If the valuation on your home went up and we keep the mill levy the same, your taxes absolutely go up. That is a true statement. And I don't think we would ever dispute that, and we've never disputed that in here. Different. What I'm trying to say, though, here is that just because we're trying to hold it flat doesn't mean we're increasing our expenditures 13.4%. That's not the case. The other thing I would like to point out is, yes, the CPI is a good gauge of where things are going. I think we've debated this over the last couple of years that it's probably not accurate. I think that the federal government tries to manipulate it to make themselves look better than they actually are. But more importantly, the items that we purchase and utilize are different than what the CPI is. Wages, oil, fuel, equipment, all those things are our big expenditures. Our equipment expenditures are up. The cost of some of our vehicles is doubled in the last 3 years. Doubled. That's a 100% increase. Fuel prices are up. Oil prices are way up. Our projects are coming in. We saw on one bridge project earlier this year, the increase in that project in a 6-month period went up to 30% in 6 months. And those bridges are $1 million a pop, so add 30% on, $1.3 million, when we were thinking they were going to be around $700,000 to $1 million. Now they're between $1 million and $1.3 million. So I get it. I pay taxes in this county. You all pay taxes in this county. None of us want our taxes to go up. But there is a cost of doing business in the government, and I'm working hard to get that mill levy to be flat. And I'm telling you that there are departments that make very good cases for the need for the expenditures that they have, that they're not going to get those funds. If the board would like to direct me to cut the mill levy, I will go back to the board, to the drawing board and try to get that done. But it does mean a reduction in services.
You ready for the rainy day speech?
Yeah. I think so.
I'll be the bad guy here. A year ago, we sent letters to outside agencies to not expect funding. Is that correct? We
Yes.
instructed you to do that?
Yes,
The letters were sent.
they should not rely on future funding.
Well, the years come by,
It's raining.
and it's raining. Well, I wish it was, but, I mean, come on. We're not legally obligated to fund these. You know, we have legal obligations for certain things, but outside agencies, it's extra. And why are we telling people you're going to pay, your tax dollars are going to a museum or a historical society? Why do we do that?
That's a problem.
I think that's zeroed out. We're not doing museums.
Well, any outside agency.
The guidance center is an outside agency.
No, that's mental health.
Well, it's funded under appropriations.
It's a contractual obligation to the guidance center.
Right.
So
The two biggest, the two biggest what are labeled outside agencies are the guidance center and the extension. Those are the two biggest ones. Sometimes we list them in the appropriations because they are an outside fund that we send money to. But the other agencies that you're referring to, like St. Vincent's Clinic, CASA, Alliance Against Family Violence, Riverside Resources, those are services that I think what your Commissioner, you're saying is we're not obligated to fund those. And we're not obligated to fund the Extension Office, and we're also not obligated to fund the Soil Conservation District, but we do and have.
So I have a couple things in response to when you bought your house for $100,000. Now it's valued, according to the comparable sales, it's valued at $150,000, and the mill is the same. Your house is $150,000. You're going to pay taxes on $150,000 because your house actually probably would sell for $150,000. But it's not a function of county government or city government or the townships. We didn't raise your taxes. Your house became more valuable. You have a more valuable asset. Now, the commissioners have all agreed that we want the state to change through the constitutional amendment to limit the amount your taxes could go up to only 4%. They passed it through the Senate. It's waiting to be voted on in the House. So when I see local representatives, coming to local government and saying, you guys need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do this, I'm thinking, you need to go to Topeka and make sure when this comes up on the floor of the House of Representatives that this amendment goes on the ballot so that we can limit the taxes to only a 4% increase.
All we're doing is following the law.
Right. We're not under control of the system that was set up by the state. The state set up the system. We're trying to reduce, and we have reduced property taxes over the last 5 years over $1.25 million.
Yeah.
So the county commissioners have been reducing property taxes.
So,
But your value on your house may be going up, and the state of Kansas allows that valuation. We've had people in Linwood that had their value go up 27% in 1 year. So now they're paying property taxes on a much more valuable home. So we have worked on this, but a lot of this is not under our control. And it really is in Topeka where the problem is, not at your county commission level, because I can tell you these budgets, and we're going to go through some of the budgets. I have some questions on the budget. We have some places where we can make changes, but I just think the system is set. We didn't establish the system of property taxes.
Have you been following Jackson County, Missouri?
A little bit.
Oh, yeah.
They were delayed in there. Yeah.
But also on our budget, I guess we're discussing budget, so I think we're going to have some unfunded transportation needs in this budget we're working on right now. And what I mean by that is, when we do our biannual bridge inspections, it's going to come where we're going to close a road. E58 come to mind?
Yep.
We had the funds, but And look how long that took.
We're getting to a critical mass
We're getting
point.
very critical on
our bridges.
transportation or infrastructure.
Yep.
And we are asking, we're making the ask down the southern part of the county where this this Panasonic plant is. We're making the ask where we have some bridges that are going to be impacted by the increased traffic. We're asking the state to help give us some more funding.
With that help comes a match.
So
They're not
Exactly.
100% funded, so you got to have money to make the match. And I don't know where we're in looking at that budget. And I've worked on the road budget for many years.
Yep.
It's you just can't keep kicking the can down the road. That's how we got to where we're at now.
That's a fact.
If we don't have 3 bridges going on a year, we're
Behind the ball. Do you have anything else, Mr. Lothry, about the budget? Do you have something else?
I have some more on the budget. Let's turn over here to. I have
Let me get my notes.
So on the budget of a couple of the departments, I've been going through each line item on the departments, and I looked at the carryover year to year on each one of these budgets.
Which one are you on?
I'm on the sheriff's budget. So in 2018, we had 190,000 carryover, 216 carryover, 400,000 carryover, 2021, 378,000 carryover, 2022, 475,000 carryover, and of the budget 2023, we're halfway through the year, we're looking projected around that 400,000 level of a carryover. So I think I think in budgeting, one thing we can just say is on some where we have a large carryover and it looks like it's gotten higher since 2020, maybe we can cut that level of the carryover. Maybe down to instead
Wasn't
of
his increase 385,000?
I don't know what his increase. I'm just looking at what the carryover was.
It's about 3%.
Yeah, it was. That gives me
He came in with a very good
Right.
percentage wise, but as far as the carryover where we could make it, instead of, it looks like there's about 200,000 at least that could be reduced in the carryover.
Well, the problem with carryovers, what you got to look at first is how much of those carryovers are for things that were supposed to be done in that year that for time reasons didn't get under the wire done that year, so they have to be done in the next year. So you have to move that money into a equipment reserve or a capital improvement fund.
Well, he has a cap. I mean, we have the equip. We have
Use it for the next year.
that doesn't affect. That doesn't affect what he's moving over into the equipment reserve, and all. He's still moving 386,000 into the.
But how much of that
reserve.
is for something that should have been spent in the year before that needs to be spent?
Well,
But the
when
timing
I'm
comes
looking at a
out.
budget, I'm looking at we're getting this big carryover. So let's just say instead of a 400,000, let's just cut that down to 200,000 carryover. Still gives him a lot of room.
Michael,
Yeah.
you're talking about positions that have not been filled.
No, that might be part of it, but it's
Okay.
it's the year for year
Okay.
excess coming out of the department.
Okay.
And if we just instruct Mark to, in his budgeting process, to cut that carryover instead of 400 down to no more than 200, that would allow him some additional room in his budget.
I think what you're referring to is obviously the year-to-year cash budget versus actual.
Right.
And it's the average over the last few years has been for the sheriff has been around that $400,000 mark. I think probably a lot of that, Commissioner Mike Smith, is like you were alluding to, is potentially unfilled positions that create that cash carryover. You don't. The directive would not actually be to reduce the cash carryover; it would be reduce expenditures, the
Right.
budgeted expenditures, by $200,000 because the cash carryover has been this historical 400,000. And certainly I can do that if that's the direction. Certainly do
He was a little under 3% increase is what he was asking for,
that.
correct?
2.95, 2.9.
Yeah,
Okay.
right like that. Yeah.
All right.
And this doesn't affect that at all. This just is saying we're going to adjust the carryover amount downward. This doesn't affect his
Yeah.
budget.
Well, no, if we had done that in
Services-wise.
Public Works last year, we would have had a little problem. There was no carryover.
It was almost nothing.
But when we're doing a budget and we're
Right.
looking at these things, historic, I mean, this is, you look at what you actually spent, not what you budgeted.
Right. I wish we would ask that last when the sheriff was here.
Sitting there, yeah.
I mean,
Well, and this,
I know
this is
what
just
you're
one.
saying.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying, but I mean,
It could be. I'm just saying.
It could be.
careful.
It-
Be
you-
careful.
you
It's not
could,
something
but
that
I mean,
just didn't get spent because of the timeline.
Well, the numbers seem to have gone up around 2020 to about this $400,000 mark.
Is that all you had, Mike?
Well, no, that's I just think if I'm asking for Mark to work on something, that's what and I don't know how we do that, but I think that
I think
we
you
should.
just did.
What's that?
I think you just
I think
did.
you just did, yeah.
Well, I mean,
Have a look
is
at
it a
it.
consensus of the board that that's what you want him to do?
Well, I think with the law enforcement, you at least, if that's what the consensus is, you have the conversation with Sheriff Dedeke and see if we're all tracking on the same thing, if there's something we're not missing on that.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just a question for the sheriff.
Also, on economic development, as Mark's developing the budget, I know we left the funding the same, but my opinion would be that we give Mark discretion if he's needing $50,000, $70,000, that he has discretion to make changes to that. I don't know how the rest of you feel.
Talking that rainy day fund again, aren't we? You talking about
The funding that's going to go into the, I think economic development could take if we needed to, I'm concerned for the infrastructure part, cutting the roads and bridges.
I'm very concerned.
And so if I would wish that we get the focus to get the infrastructure of the county focus on that. And if we need to make some changes, I'd even be willing to make some changes in that department. Now, county attorney budget, 2 years ago, he was sitting at 1885,624, and now his request is 26. And I think, Mark, you did make some adjustments on that. But my question is, we funded some extra positions. How did we grow from the 18? I mean, what the extra positions were designed to make up the ground for these extra cases during COVID, weren't they?
There was a couple mid-year requests, I believe.
Kind of walk us through how that all went.
Well, commissioners, I'll do my best. Obviously, the county attorney is probably better suited to discuss his budget. But over the years, the county attorney has come to the Board of County Commissioners and asked for increased staffing, and those have been approved. I think there was maybe one where he got half of what he was asking for. Last year or 2 years ago, he came in and asked for ARPA funding. It would have been the beginning of last year. Some of the ARPA funds to help hire attorneys to help with the backlog of cases. Those positions were not hired. He did hire, I think, administrative staff. But that, again, at that time, it was understood that funding was for 1 year, and it went away. And
Yeah.
it went away at the beginning of 2020.
So that administrative funding went away with ARPA.
All the
funds.
ARPA funding, it was, again, a one-time thing, and it went away. Anything that wasn't spent went back to the ARPA funds at the beginning of 2023.
But those administrative positions stayed in the budget,
They stayed in the budget request,
in the budget
but they
request.
did not stay in, they weren't budgeted for in 2023. So,
Because they had been ARPA funded.
right. So, and I think when the county attorney came in, at that time, the discussion was that this is one-time funding. When it's done, you have to figure out how that works in your budget, and that if, once the backlog's over, it's over. So, I think that's where we're at with that. I did amend the request from the county attorney for 2024. I did adjust it, and we'll be meeting with him to discuss that.
Well, throwing my opinion out there. I think we should go back to the 1885 and give him 4% and 4% like every other agency, and that funding 2.6 million is just completely.
So that would have been about $280,000 increase.
That would have been about at the 4% level that everybody else had.
No, prior to the 4. What he'd asked for was about a $280,000 increase. Wasn't it?
Oh, the original. I don't have that right in front of me, but I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right. But the number from last year was higher because there was help jog my memory on this we did some computer software funding.
For 2023, there's $225,000, I believe, included for a one-time purchase. So you'd have to back that out before you do the 2024
Right.
budget.
And so that's sort of why this budget's it really needs to get back to what it was in 2022 plus 4% and 4%. You know that it's ballooned a little bit faster than it should.
I think too, Commissioners, we've all seen the last couple of years that and we had the conversation. What you said, it's a one-time purchase. It's not part of the ongoing budget. We're not going to put it in there to increase that budget so high. It's a one-time pay, and then we next year it has to come out unless there's something that justifies something else in there. But we made it very clear it was a one-time, and he understood that, or that he acknowledged that's what we were doing.
And when he came in for the request for the ARPA funds, he understood that was also temporary. It shouldn't have been put into the budget.
And I've had conversations with him on that, yes.
So I think that needs to be backed out.
Well, Commissioners, on your 4%, that would take another $380,000 off of his budget over what I've already reduced it.
And that probably represents at least those two administrative staff positions.
At a minimum.
Now, Mark, I want you to, in my opinion, only have some latitude to make it. You see and hear things that we may not have heard or privy to that makes it important that we stay with some things, but I definitely think there's room for improvement on reducing that.
And I agree with Commissioner Smith on some of these outside agencies. We're going to have to look at that real close.
To me, that's the lowest hanging fruit we got.
So, I mean, there's a lot more to talk about on the budget, but maybe we should wait till next week.
Yeah, this is enough.
I did reduce some of the outside agency requests already. Just again, I zeroed out one that was a $20,000 request, I believe. I just took them down to zero. But I did cut some of those outside agency budgets already. But if the board, I'm a little hesitant on some of those. They obviously, those are some great organizations. And I know that it's a pretty significant impact when we pull funding, and we did send them a letter saying you can't rely on this funding.
In advance.
And I think that the handout that Commissioner Doug Smith gave today is really, even though it's from Davy Crockett, so it's a little bit dated maybe, I think it's still pertinent today, and that is we are taking other folks' money and redistributing it to organizations that they have no say over. And maybe they would choose to give them money, maybe they wouldn't. But they have the ability to give those organizations money already if they wanted to and could afford to. So I get that, but those are going to be tough for me to cut without some board direction on this.
Right.
You know where I stand.
And we'll be coming back to this next week again.
It'll be on agenda every week
From
until
now
we
on.
adopt the budget.
Yeah.
I keep looking.
That all you had, Mike?
That's all I got.
Chairman, go right ahead.
Okay, so I put together some information based on emails and phone calls I've had recently over the last couple of years, and then also seeing how this process works over the last 30 or 40 years. So I think the biggest problem is a lot of people just don't understand exactly how a lot of things work. So I'm going to try to explain some of the basic things that are going on. So high property taxes and how did we get here? So I'm sure you've all heard the saying, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat mistakes. So let's start back in 1950 when the counties only updated values on properties when they sold, which happens to be one of the new proposals to fix the current situation on property valuation right now in Topeka. There have been several options presented to supposedly fix the rate of the increased values. One is freeze the values. One is only increase the values to set 3% or whatever the current cost of living increase is for that particular year, which I'm not against as long as it's a temporary fix until the real problem can be ironed out. Another option offered is just go by straight square foot on every building. So the list goes on, but like I said, if you don't learn from mistakes, you will almost certainly repeat them. So let's look at 1950 to 1980. A house that sold in 1950 for $30,000 is now worth $300,000 in 1980. But it's still valued on the county tax roll for $30,000 because it has never sold in those 30 years. And now in 1980, another house that just sold for $300,000 is put on the tax roll at $300,000. So even though both houses we're talking about are worth $300,000 in 1980 market, one person is paying 10 times more taxes than the other guy. That's not fair. So reappraisal was born. The state stepped in and told all 105 counties they had to reappraise every parcel in their county and bring each property up to its current market value, so that all values were fair and equitable. To make sure we didn't get in the same situation again down the road, where property values were not fair and equitable, a new set of laws were entered into our state constitution. Every year, each parcel's value is kept in line with its current market values. This would guarantee you always pay your fair share of taxes based on values compared to everyone else. The valuation system the state made each county use was pretty much the exact same system fee appraisers use. When you hire one to appraise your home, or a bank gets an appraisal done on a property for a loan purpose. This Marshall Swift-based process uses actual sale prices of 5 houses just like yours to come up with a value on your property. They pick 5 houses as identical as they can find to yours that have actually sold in the last 6 months and average those sale prices together to see what your house should sell for on the current open market. You don't have to do any improvements on your home to see the value increase, because your value is determined by what the 5 comparable houses sold for. Now, we can spend hours in talking about this process and define identical houses. A common argument is there is no other house like mine. In some cases, that is true, so they have to find similar houses. There's an entire segment in the appraisal process about that as well. There's a rating scale that scores attributes about your house compared to others. The CDU rating, the condition, the age, square footage, materials used, quality, etc. are all taken into account. Location is another big element to find values on similar homes. Sometimes I hear people upset because the county used a comparable home clean across the county to value your home. There are aspects to that to understand as well. The county appraiser builds a neighborhood map. It basically defines characteristics of a neighborhood like average lot size, average age of the home, square footage, topography, drainage, amenities, utilities, etc., so that they can find similar neighborhoods to yours. So if you get compared to a house clean across the county, it is still required to be in a similar type of neighborhood based on criteria. All this is still subjective to plenty of criticism depending on where you're looking at it from. But at the end of the day, the proof of whether it works or not is also built into the system. Argue all you want about how the county came up with your value, but when houses sell, the state requires that the sale price has to be within 10% of what the county value is on that. If your house sells for $100,000, the county had to have had between $90,000 and $110,000 on it for the county to be in compliance with PVD regulations. They run a report at the end of the year like a quality control, to compare every sale price to what the county appraiser had on each of those houses. Our report for this year showed that Leavenworth County is typically assessing houses for about 85% of what they sell for. Our county appraiser has tried to keep in compliance with PVD regulations as far to the low side as possible, to a point he now has to fix being too low. Now, there are always exceptions to everything. One of the things I wanted to go over with you today is the simplest problem to fix, and that's mistakes. When you get your valuation notice, it's always a good idea just to make sure the county has accurate information about your property. If you have never talked to the county appraiser's office, I think it's a good idea to do that at least once. You want to make sure they don't have you down for 4 bedrooms instead of 3, or too many bathrooms, or too much square footage, or the year built wrong, condition of the interior, etc., because they don't go inside your house. If they don't have a questionnaire filled out by you, they're only guessing at what's inside. Also, another big easy fix is ag use. Agricultural land is valued much less than market value. So if you use any part of your land for ag purposes like hay ground, crops, cows, etc., you want to make sure the county appraiser has it listed that way. A 10-acre residential lot would typically carry a $100,000 residential value. But if that same 10 acres was ag use, it would carry about a $1,000 value. In tax dollars, that would be $1,500 a year versus $150 a year. That's a huge difference. The biggest question to ask yourself is, would I sell my house for the amount the county has it appraised for? I know a lot of people are saying, but I don't want to sell my house, and I understand that. But to figure out if the system is working for you or not, you have to figure this out. Would my house sell for what the county has on it? No one wants to see the county raise their appraised value because they know that value is tied to taxes. But is it a fair market value? If you don't know what your house is really worth, ask a realtor to look at it as if you were going to sell it, and they will tell you what it would sell for, or ask an appraiser to look at it. This will help you determine if there is a mistake on the county's part or not. If there are no mistakes and the county has fair market value on your property, but your taxes are getting higher every year to an unsustainable level, then what's the answer? First, you have to understand how it all works before you can find a solution. The short answer is always cut spending. Who sent the tax bill? It must be their fault. Let's kill the messenger. Well, that's why the real problem persists and isn't even getting addressed. But let's look at the knee-jerk reaction of county needs to cut the spending, which is what Senate Bill 13 was supposed to have fixed. Well, it didn't. Why? Because that's not the problem. I'm not saying you don't have to be very frugal with the county budget. That was the first thing the county did. Over the last 30 years, Leavenworth County has been acting like they were under Senate Bill 13 all along. That's why Senate Bill 13 did nothing to help the tax problem in Leavenworth County. Everything in the bill we have already done. It says the county needs to stay revenue neutral. That means only spend the same amount of money on the county budget this year as you did last year. Well, just like your personal household budget, if you try to only spend the same money this year as you did last year, the cost of living will force you to cut something out of the budget. You can't have the same things you had last year. Something has to go. So you just cut out the fat and only pay for what you absolutely need. And you can do that for a couple of years. But after a while, there's nothing left to cut, unless you want to really start noticing important things missing. There is no way you can remain revenue neutral 10 years from now with the cost of living going up an average of 4% each year. That means it costs you 40% more in 2033 to have the same things you had in 2023. If you did remain revenue neutral for that 10-year period, you would have had to have cut your budget, assets and services, 40%. This is unattainable. I understand people saying we need to cut the fat out of the county budget. The county started drastically cutting county budgets about 30 years ago. They stopped giving raises to employees. After years of no raises, they took it up a notch by cutting salaries. When someone would leave, the new hire was paid less. Problem with this is the county got way behind on comparable salaries across the board. People are leaving left and right to go to better paying jobs. We did a RIF, reduction in force. We laid off employees. Problem with this is the remaining employees' workloads went up, so service to the public went down. They revoked several holidays. This works well cutting costs because your 24/7 employees get paid double time and regular employees get paid for not working. They stopped paying saved up sick leave to people when they retire. They stopped buying new cars and made all departments use old sheriff's cars after they racked up 300,000 miles on them. They combined departments and jobs. We used to have brush crews to keep the dishes and the trees mowed and cleared. We cut health inspectors. They cut out county doing perk tests. A perk test determines whether your land can have a lagoon or a septic system. What's the big deal? A lagoon is 1/10 of the cost of a septic system. If you want to save money, you want your land to fail a perk test, so you get to put in a cheaper lagoon. If you don't want the sight or smell of a lagoon, you want a perk test to pass so you can have an underground septic system. We've noticed more failed lagoons and laterals since the county stopped doing the perk test. My point is, everything we cut comes with consequences. When do the consequences outweigh the savings? That's where we are today. Every department has cut and cut until public outcry for that service or lack of service is loud enough. They stop cutting and back up one step. We have reached a minimum acceptable level of service in every department. Every single county department is now severely underfunded. Some more than others. Road and bridge, for example. There are 150 bridges in the county. A bridge lasts about 50 years. So to be responsible, we should be replacing 3 bridges every year. But to try and lower the budget over the last 20 or 30 years, the county has cut the bridge fund to an irresponsible point, and we are only replacing 1 bridge a year. The easiest can to kick down the street is a budget line item that doesn't show up right now. No one will notice this fund is short for years down the road. Well, guess what? We are years down the road right now. The county used to blade your driveway or clear snow for 1 hour per taxpayer per year. We used to put in driveway tubes. We used to stripe the roads in-house. We used to spray dust control chemicals on gravel roads. We tried cutting back mowing the ditches this last summer, and the calls were nonstop complaining about it. There is also a safety factor problem by not mowing ditches. You can't see oncoming traffic coming out of driveways or crossroads. More serious consequences of cutting spending. Most recently, some things we did to save money is stop paying almost $100,000 a year in rent for several departments, including the Council on Aging. After spending almost $1 million in rent, we now have a permanent home for them at Cushing. We also are going to rent out the 3rd and 4th floors to pay all the utilities in the entire building and cover repairs and maintenance on the county departments. So you went from being a tenant to being a landlord. We did the reverse with our juvenile detention center to save money. It was costing us about $350,000 a year to maintain this facility, and sometimes only had 1 prisoner in it. So the sheriff contracted with Wyandotte County now to hold our juveniles, and the saving is tremendous. The list goes on and on. What I'm trying to make sure everyone understands is that we didn't just start cutting the budget lately. Way before Senate Bill 13 was passed, we had already set our target to remain revenue neutral every year for the last 30 years. In reality, Leavenworth County has cut the budget so much over the years, we have the 7th lowest mill levy in the state of Kansas. Out of 105 counties, there are only 6 counties that you could pay less taxes to the county than us. I know certain people keep telling you Leavenworth County has the highest mill levy or the 4th highest mill levy or whatever they're saying lately. It's simply not true. Look it up. It's easy information to find. I think when they say that, they're confusing the combined mill levy, which includes the school levy, the library levy, the township levy, all the other levies, which the county commission has no control over. The levy we do control, we have lowered every year for the last 4 or 5 years and now have the 7th lowest in the state. All this cutting has been done to try and lower your taxes, but your taxes are still too high. That's because that's not the real problem. Even if we drastically cut the county budget, which makes up about 28% of the majority of people's tax bill, let's say we cut it 20% for argument's sake. Forget about remaining revenue neutral. We're going to go above and beyond and cut it 20%. If your tax bill is $4,000 a year, your tax bill would only go down about $200. So you have decimated your assets and services to yourselves by cutting the county budget 20%, and your tax bill is still $3,800 instead of $4,000. You can't expect that even a large cut on one of the smallest divisions of your tax bill will make much of a difference. The real problem is Kansas puts too much weight on property tax. There are 3 main sources of taxation: property tax, income tax, and sales tax. Kansas puts about 90% of the weight for county budgets on property tax. about 10% on sales tax, and 0 on income tax. The least fair way to tax is property tax. It only taxes a few, so a few have to pay a lot. Income tax and sales tax include a lot of people, so a lot of people would only have to pay a little. The property tax system doesn't care how much you make, it cares how nice your house is. With income tax and sales tax, if you make a lot, you can afford to pay taxes. If you make a little, you only have to pay a little. The state actually came out with a Band-Aid fix using this exact theory. It's called the LAVTR. The name is Local Ad Valorem Tax Relief because that's what it was meant for. It was meant to relieve property taxes. It shifts some of the weight off property tax onto sales tax. There's a state law that says the state is supposed to pay each county the LAVTR funds every year to help lower property tax. The state legislators saw the problem of too much weight on property tax. They came up with the LAVTR as a temporary relief to offset property tax with sales tax. The problem is the state ran out of money, so they decided to just keep the LAVTR funds. This would be about $3 million a year every year for Leavenworth County alone, and we could lower our mill levy about 4 full mills. But they vote every other year to not follow the law and keep your money. Another state fix to offset high taxes that somehow just stopped happening in Kansas was the lottery. Remember back when the state had TV commercials trying to get the voters to pass the lottery? They advertised that the lottery money would go to schools, which would drastically lower your property taxes, because 60% of your tax bill goes to the schools. Today, 0 lottery money goes to the schools. What happened? Whatever happened, happened at the state level, not at the county level. But back to Senate Bill 13, it's called the Truth in Taxation Bill. Supposedly to make the taxing entities, like the county, be more transparent to the taxpayers to show how the tax money is collected and spent. Again, this bill did not change anything for Leavenworth County. We already remain revenue neutral every year and only increase the budget approximately what the cost of living is that year. We already have open meetings on the budget. We already vote on the budget increases in public session. We already did everything Senate Bill 13 supposedly addresses. I wish they would take it a step further. If you really want a truth and taxation bill to cover everything, then make it apply to the state's budget as well. The state exempts themselves from Senate Bill 13. They not only don't have to remain revenue neutral, their budget increased over 24% last year. Another transparency should be the state unfunded mandates. About 30% of the county's budget cannot even be cut. It is put in place by state unfunded mandates. The state says you will have this department or service by state law, but the state will not pay for it. The money has to come out of the county's budget. Missouri passed the Hancock Amendment to stop state unfunded mandates because they knew it was not fair to the county. So when someone says county's share of your taxes is about 28%, they don't tell you that about 9% of that is state unfunded mandates. Another lack of transparency is the assessed value. Different weighted percentages placed on property. Residential land is 11.5%, ag is 25%, commercial is 30%. This was all smoke and mirror system the state came up with to manipulate valuations right in front of your eyes so no one can understand it. There's no reason to use assessed values. Instead, the straight up appraised values, other than that to make straight up appraised values could be used instead of the assessed values to make it non-transparent. Have Senate Bill 13 include more transparent measures at the state level if you want full transparency. Don't include the state. So what do I suggest? After looking at this whole system over almost the last 40 years, the appraisal system is not broken. It does a pretty good job at keeping everyone at current market value each year. Saying the appraisal system is a problem will not fix high taxes. Saying the county's budget needs cut will not fix high taxes. The LAVTR would temporarily help a lot, but it by itself would not fix high taxes in Leavenworth County. Using a property tax-based system is especially bad for Leavenworth County because we're 35% property tax exempt. Fort Leavenworth, the prisons, the churches, and the school property, all worth about $2.8 billion in valuation, pays 0 property tax. That means the other 65% of us are paying our share and their share. If we would shift some of the weight off of property tax and onto income tax and sales tax, it would fix our high property tax problem. The biggest problem for Leavenworth County is we don't receive a pilot check. That's a payment in lieu of taxes check from the federal government for the exempt federal property here. Like I said, $2.8 billion in valuation on Fort Leavenworth is not paying any property tax. The VA and the federal prison also hugely contribute to this problem. So everyone else that is paying taxes agrees to pay more to make up for the difference. The federal government understands that without a pilot check to replace lost taxes, a lot of cities and counties could not afford to stay in business. So they write a pilot check to compensate those cities and counties. The problem is they only write pilot checks for Department of Interior facilities, not Department of Defense facilities. For the last 4 years, I've been working with D.C. and our legislators to get the law changed to include Department of Defense facilities. This would mean about a $30 million a year check to the county we should be receiving now. That would cut everyone's property taxes in almost half. This isn't about not thanking our military for their service. This is about the federal government being a good neighbor. We totally understand the importance of having the fort in our community. The jobs and the money spent in our community are vital. But the system the state makes us use, property taxes, does not translate federal property into the county budget very well. And by very well, I mean zero. House Bill 79 would have drastically reduced Leavenworth County's property taxes by at least half. Right now, only about 33,000 parcel owners are paying all the bills. If you go to income tax and sales tax, hundreds of thousands of people will be paying the bills. When you spread the bills out among few people, they have to pay it a lot. If you spread it out among more people, they pay a little. I think the numbers would surprise you. By adding 4% income tax, you could cut property taxes in half across the state. I think the better answer, though, is to cut property taxes is half with a 2% increase in income tax and sales tax. That way you diversify and put equal weight on all three legs of taxation. Ask yourself, would you trade paying 2% more in income tax and sales tax if you paid half of the property taxes you paid now? And actually only a 1% increase for Leavenworth County would cut our taxes in half. Another way to drastically lower taxes is broadening your tax base. More people help to pay the bills. Increased number of homes helps lower taxes. It's hard to see this because the cost of living expense is still outpacing our new construction in our county. Your taxes keep going up even after adding more houses. What you don't see is your taxes would have gone up even more without the new construction. There's also a misconception that more houses cost existing residents more money because they stretch your infrastructure too thin. Even though this is true to a certain extent, it's not true here. If you're the only house in your tax district, you will have to pay 100% of the bills. If another house gets built in your tax district, now you only pay 50% of the bills. With 10 houses in your tax district, now you're paying 10% of the bills. It's pretty simple math. Now you look at the infrastructure issue. If you're talking about rural residential housing, we are not talking about the $150,000 home anymore, new home. The average new home value today is $480,000. That's a lot more tax money. Gas utility is not stretched too thin. Most everyone in the rural county is on propane. There's no shortage of propane companies that would love delivering a tank to your new home. The electric companies in our county have all said there is no problem adding new customers. That's why they don't even charge you for new hookups. All the water districts tell us they welcome new customers. The sheriffs and EMS say there's not even close to having issues serving more households. So helping support new residential construction is something we can do at the local level to lower taxes. Another way economic development can lower taxes is adding commercial and industrial businesses. Commercial pays a lot more taxes than residential. But to do that, you have to have a location where those entities want to be. Access is the key. Business needs lots of residential rooftops close to fill their jobs, and they need to be close to major transportation hubs. We don't have railroads, river traffic, airports, or even major highway connections for the most part. If we could fix this problem, industry would come. If we were to build a bridge connecting Eisenhower Road to 152 Highway at 435 in Missouri, we would become much more financially independent. Adding residential housing, we are doing now. Building the new bridge will take a while to get done. The most important way to fix high property taxes is for the state legislators to shift the weight off property tax onto income tax and sales tax. Please ask your legislators for a blue ribbon audit on the taxation system at the state level. Another aspect of this is to make sure the income and sales tax is used 100% to relieve property taxes. It needs to be built into the bill or the Constitution so it doesn't just end up being another added tax on top of property tax. The county continues to cut as much as we can and come up with new ideas to save tax money. But they are small measures that can't make up the difference on your tax bill. It is your county budget. The county is 100% service related. All we do is turn every penny of your tax money into assets and services for you. Anything we cut is your assets and services. Stop asking to cut your own services. Start asking to fix the real problem. The real fix has to be done by you at the state and federal levels. Help our state legislators understand the real problem. If we don't all understand this, we will continue to pay high property taxes. In summation, the way to fix high property taxes, in my opinion, are pass a bill like Senate Bill 8 that caps the new appraisals about 3% or the cost of living each year. Get a pilot check from the federal government. That would equal about $30 million a year. Make the state return our LAVTR funds. That would be about $3 million a year. Pass a bill like House Bill 79, allowing us to use 1% earnings tax to cut property tax. That would be about $30 million a year. And build the new bridge connecting Lansing to 152 Highway. Unlimited potential. The one common denominator in all these solutions is that they can only be done at the state or federal legislation level. The county does not have the authority to do any of these. Otherwise, we surely already would have. And I yield my time.
Good.
Did you guys have anything else you wanted to talk about on presentations?
I did have one
First, I'd
question
have
for
one too.
Mr. Lawfrey.
Go ahead.
When we were talking about the budget and economic development, we had met with the Port Authority several months back, and I'd asked about a funding mechanism, that they'd have a recommendation of putting a funding mechanism in place. Do you know if we ever heard back from any of that?
We haven't received anything back on that.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm just thinking of ways to fund it. Just shooting from the hip, but just, whether the new business comes in, they get the taxes for a few years or something to help fund their, I'm just looking for any scenario.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to come up here at budget time and say, hey, we need,
Pay back into that pot so you don't have to come up here every time.
right.
Exactly.
And if if the business comes in that they had brought in,
Yeah, agree.
give them something, a portion of the taxes or all the taxes for a few years, and then move on and go to the next business.
We have a mill set aside for that currently, don't we? That's economic
It's about
development.
0.3 mil. It's about a third of a mil.
A third of a mill.
Okay.
Have something, Commissioner?
Yeah, just one thing from Lansing side, something positive, I think. This Saturday, July 1st, the Lansing will have their annual fireworks show in Town Center. Town Center is, of course, on Main Street, and this is probably the last time since TSC is moving there, and also in the future, Kansas Community College is moving there. It's always a good crowd. They start early in the day with things for people to do, but they always put on a good show with you. So you have the opportunity. Again, it's coming up Saturday.
When's the water park supposed to be finished?
The new pool.
The new.
They are working on the plans right now. That should be. They're looking at next year if everything goes to an important plan.
Before
They got.
the season starts next year.
Yeah, if everything goes in plan, sometimes things get moved around, but that's what they're looking at right now is next year.
I had that question.
That's all I have, Chairman.
Okay. I don't think we have any additional public comment. Do we? Anybody wanted to speak? Any of the other?
Just what all we got done on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Commissioner, you did have.
Oh, yes, sir. Would you like to talk?
Would it be possible to get a copy of the statement that you just read?
Sure. Yep. Sure. I'll meet you after the meeting and get you a copy.
Thank you, sir.
We're passing them out, so I'm glad you want it.
There'll be a pop quiz on it. So, anyway, I had Fairmount Township last Thursday night meeting. They're working on their budget, of course. I
Had the Mid-America Regional Council meeting yesterday, and then tonight I have Basehor City Council meeting.
Commissioner Stevens?
I don't have much, but I did want to recognize that the mayor of Tonganoxie is in the audience today, and appreciate him. And also Thursdays, the farmers market. What time does it start? 5 or 6? I don't know. The farmers market in Tonganoxie. 5 to 8 on Thursday.
And we got the Lovemore City Commissioner in the audience.
And we do. Oh, I
Commissioner
didn't
Amy.
want to ignore Ed.
I wasn't going to forget
Sorry,
about you,
Ed.
Ed. Don't even think about it.
I was going to get you on as my second.
Do a good job. Motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.